Hello everybody, thank you for joining us to our Divorce Club November session. I'm Lauren Preedy, as many of you will know, and I'm the head of the relationships team at Ian Walker Family Law, and I'll let Claire introduce herself in a moment. We are all surprised how quickly the year has gone, so hope that this session will provide some helpful tips over what can be a pretty emotional and stressful time for many people, especially if you have got issues with children. So we hope this will give you lots to think about and lots of helpful tips over the coming festive period. So I'll hand over to Claire to introduce herself. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you very much, Lauren. It's lovely to be here again on this cold November day. I'm looking forward to Christmas. So yes, as Lauren said, my name is Claire Black. I'm actually in the process of changing my name, so I will become Claire Macklin in the very near future, following my second divorce. So just to explain why I've got Macklin in brackets at the bottom there. So yes, today we're here to talk about Christmas, and I do a lot of work with clients around Christmas, because my role as a divorce coach is to help people to come to terms with some of the emotions that they might feel, to perhaps reframe what's happening to them. And some of these things like Christmas, birthdays, these are things that come up, particularly in the first year post-divorce. They come up and they can be very tricky to navigate. So what we'd like to do today is give you some ideas about how you can navigate your way through this period of time, and particularly if it's very troublesome for you. So I'm going to share my screen so that you don't just have to look at me the whole time. Share, there we go. Let's wait for it to come up. Okay, so yes, as I said, I'm Claire Black. I'm a specialist breakup and divorce coach. I'm a master NLP practitioner. I'm a former lawyer. I've been divorced twice now. Once, the first time was not my choice, and the second time was my decision. I'm the single mum of two teenage boys. They're 18 and 16 now, but were 1 and 3 when I first got divorced. So I've been through a lot of Christmases as a single parent. And I'm also the author of a book, Breakup from Crisis to Confidence. Okay, if you'd like a copy of that, just let me know, or you can find it on my website. So the Divorce Support Club was set up with Ian Walker, I think 2 years ago now, and these are the kind of the pillars of everything that we do. What we're trying to do is help you to concentrate on you rather than focusing on your ex, to concentrate on yourself and what you can do, to help you become calm and get clarity, and to focus on what you can control. And that's going to be really important in today's session. To also help you to see options and choices, to communicate more effectively, and ultimately to be able to create a future that you're excited about. So I know that Christmas can be a really, really challenging time for anybody who is separated or divorced or going through a divorce. The media really doesn't help. It bombards us with images like this. And I think the Christmas adverts are already out all over the television. So we get these images of the perfect family and what a perfect family should look like. Smiling children, amazing Christmas lunches. But for those of us who are divorced or going through a separation, it isn't always like that. And perhaps you're feeling worried or anxious or down or depressed. Perhaps you're not sure what the arrangements are, or maybe you're afraid of feeling lonely on Christmas Day. And I remember feeling very anxious about Christmas when I was first separated, and also for the first couple of years afterwards, and particularly the first time that my children were spending Christmas with their dad. Since then, I've done Christmas in all kinds of different ways, and I'll talk about some of them as we go through the session today. Ultimately, though, I knew from very early on that I had a choice. So I could choose to let Christmas and the festive period get me down or have me stressed out, or I could find new and different ways to enjoy Christmas. And what I want to share with you today is some tips and questions which can help you do exactly that too. So the first thing I always think is to acknowledge how you feel. And I use this wheel a lot with my clients, because your emotions are a bit like messengers knocking on the door. If you squash them down, they will just come back again and again, knocking louder and louder until they burst through. So it's really important to look at your feelings, acknowledge them, name them, and that will take away some of their power over you. So perhaps looking at this, you perhaps recognise some of these feelings. Perhaps you feel sad or angry or frustrated. Whatever that feeling is, notice it, acknowledge it, and accept that it's there. Perhaps you could write down how you feel. You could journal about it. You could stand in front of a mirror perhaps and state to yourself how you feel, or share with a friend. And notice how strong those feelings are. Because one thing that's always true about feelings is that they rise and they fall. They never stay the same. They're always transient. So my feelings about my first Christmas after my divorce was that I felt anxious. I felt a bit nervous. I was afraid of feeling rather lonely if I didn't have something to distract myself with. And perhaps you feel that, and perhaps you feel something else. But whatever you feel, know that it's okay to feel that way, and be kind to yourself. So what can you also do with those feelings? Well, one of the things that you can do is ride the wave of them. So when you feel an emotion coming towards you, because you get that feeling that it's rising, ride the wave of that feeling. So imagine that you're a surfer and you're on your surfboard and you're paddling out to sea, and you can see the feeling coming towards you. And you have a choice. You could choose to try and jump over the wave, or go round the wave, or go through the wave, or under the wave. But the only way that you're going to land safely back on the shore is to ride that wave. So imagine that you turn your board and you catch the wave and you ride it back to shore. Remember, you will always land on the shore. The waves always break eventually. So when you land on the shore, just imagine yourself sitting on the beach. It's calm, it's quiet. You're no longer in the water. You can allow the sun to dry your back. You can take some really deep breaths, and then you can start to think, okay, what do I do from here? Now, Lauren will probably have some things to say about this a bit later, but one of my top tips is to plan ahead. So certainty really matters. It's always better to have clarity than to be worrying about something because you don't know what it's going to look like. So if you haven't got your Christmas plans, particularly for your children, already in place, then now's a really good time to start. If it's going to be tricky, then you've got time still to talk to your lawyer or to take advice. You've got time to have those meetings and those discussions. Be really clear on what you would like and why, and try and keep your communication very factual rather than very emotional. So one way to perhaps take some power back into your hands is to put a proposal forward to your ex-partner. I always did this. By about the end of October, beginning of November, I would speak to my family, and I would then put a proposal to my ex-husband as to how we could split the time over Christmas. Usually, he was absolutely fine with the proposal and we would agree it. But it meant that I wasn't on the back foot. I wasn't always responding. It meant that I felt that I had been proactive, which is great. I'm often asked about presents. So you can also start to plan presents, perhaps. If you can agree with your ex-partner what you're going to buy your children, then that's great. If not, then that's okay. And don't worry about it too much. We've had different years where sometimes we've shared a present, and other times, if they want something really expensive, and other times we have bought separately. As their children have got older, more and more we just buy separately for them, and they think that that's a great bonus because they get a present off dad and one off mum. Be aware, one word of caution, be aware of previous form, perhaps. So I worked with a client a year or so ago who sent her ex-partner all her ideas when he asked for suggestions for presents for their children for Christmas. And he then bought everything on that list, which left her nothing to buy herself, without going back to the children, or without them perhaps being disappointed that they didn't get what they wanted from her. So perhaps have a think about that. If your ex has form for being particularly difficult, then protect yourself from that. Now, a really good question to ask yourself is going to be, what won't I miss? Now, this is all about reframing how you feel about Christmas. So ask yourself, if there was one good thing about this situation, what would it be? And if there was one thing that I'm not going to miss this year, what would it be? So perhaps it's that you no longer have to put up with your father-in-law who drinks too much. He drinks too much whiskey, he becomes very argumentative. Perhaps your ex always went round when everyone was opening their presents with a big bin bag and collected up all the present wrappings before anybody had even had a chance to unwrap, and you'd rather do it a different way. So start to notice how you can do things a bit differently, and you can make different choices. Focus on what you can do rather than what you can't. This is really important because this is again where your power lies. When you focus on what you have control over and what you can do rather than what you can't, then you're in your zone of power. So I remember working with a client last year who came to a session around this time of year, actually, very upset and really worried because her son was going to be with his dad this year for Christmas. She was really distraught, and she spent the first 10 minutes of the session in tears, saying that she knew she was going to be at home alone for Christmas and that she knew it was going to be terrible and awful and she was going to feel really miserable. So I asked her, what could you do this year for Christmas that you wouldn't be able to do if your son was with you? And she thought for a second, and then she said, well, actually, I've been invited to my friends for Christmas Day. I know they're good fun. They've offered me a bed to stay over so I could have a few drinks. And then actually what I'd really like to do and what I've always wanted to do but have never really given it any thought because I thought I couldn't, was join the Boxing Day ride from my local stables. This client was really keen on riding. She rode a lot. And she'd always admired the riders going along in front on the beach on Boxing Day, horses galloping through the surf, etc. And she really wanted to do it. So she booked herself on. And she also talked about how she could then do Christmas with her son on a different day. So remember, Christmas is just one day, the 25th of December. You can actually celebrate your Christmas on any day you want to. So she celebrated Christmas with her son and her parents on 28th that year. And afterwards wrote me an email to say that she had really enjoyed Christmas Day. She had loved the Boxing Day ride. And her son had said that he'd had the best Christmas ever because he had a Christmas with dad and then he had Christmas all over again with his mum, and it was brilliant. Which brings me on to remembering that you always have choice. And I talk about this a lot. So if you are dreading Christmas, first ask yourself what it is that you're dreading about it. Is it perhaps waking up by yourself and feeling on your own? Or is it spending the day without your children? Or is it something else? Be really honest with yourself. And once you know what the worst part of the day is for you, then you can start to think about the choices you have to overcome that part. So even if you're going to be on your own at Christmas, you can always choose. You can choose what you're going to eat. You can choose whether you stay in bed and eat crisps with a bottle of wine, or perhaps you could choose to eat your favourite meal, stay in your pajamas all day and watch your favourite movie. So one of my friends last year decided that because she was by herself on Christmas Day, she was going to totally ignore the fact that it was Christmas and break with all her traditions. She had beans on toast for lunch. She took the dog for a really long walk and she watched her favourite movie in the afternoon. If you don't want to be on your own, then have a think now about who you could spend that time with. Do you have any other friends who perhaps are single and are on their own? Perhaps you could get together over Christmas. Perhaps you could volunteer. I know that some people I know have volunteered in a homeless shelter over Christmas to give back. Last year was my first Christmas on my own post my second separation. And I made some choices last year around this. I knew that my children were going to be with my ex-husband, so I could choose to dread it and to worry about how it would feel, or I could make some plans. So I made plans to have Christmas lunch with some friends. I walked my dog in the morning, had my lunch, and it was really interesting to see other people's traditions and some of the things that they did we're going to do this year because I really enjoyed them. So I actually began to look forward to the time rather than dreading it. In the past, I've done all kinds of things for Christmas. So one year I went to Morocco, where there was no sign of Christmas other than one blow up Santa Claus. Another year, I've been with my ex-husband's family and we've had several Christmases, in fact. So start to think about how you could do it differently and what options and choices you have. Another thing that you could do is model somebody who does this well. So do you know anybody who is separated or divorced and appears to cope really well with Christmas and manages to still have a really good time? Ask them how they do it, model how they do it, ask them how they think about it and what kind of things that they do to prepare. So you can also start to create perhaps some new traditions. So Christmas is full of all sorts of weird and wonderful traditions, and perhaps there's something that you've always wanted to do. Or perhaps your ex-partner had some traditions that you really didn't enjoy or you didn't look forward to. So one of my clients had an ex-partner who insisted on having lunch at 1 o'clock so that they could watch the Queen's or now the King's speech on the dot of 3. So it meant that their whole morning was taken up with cooking this big meal. Instead, now that they're separated, she has decided that she doesn't want to do it this way. She doesn't have to take this into account anymore. So now she spends the morning having a breakfast with Bucks Fizz and bacon sandwiches and all that kind of thing. And then she has lunch much, much later. In fact, it's more like an evening meal. So when you introduce something different or change your routine around, you're avoiding comparing now to Christmas past, and you might even create a tradition that you love. And you can do this with your children too. So another client that I was working with last year decided that she would change the whole feel of how the children and her open their stockings, for example. Her ex-husband was coming round for Christmas morning, and she didn't want to do the stockings in the way that they usually had, which was the children all come piling in to the bedroom and they open them on the bed, and obviously that wasn't appropriate anymore. So instead of doing stockings on the bed, she decided that now the children were a little bit older, they're kind of like 9 and 12, they would go downstairs and they would do their stockings over a really lovely breakfast. So she bought croissants, they had jam, they had a little bit of Bucks Fizz for the adults and fizzy orange for the children. And they completely changed it around. And the children really enjoyed it and have asked her if they can do it again the same way this year. So they've created a brand new tradition for themselves. And here's a really good question. What's the best gift I could give myself this year? So perhaps take a big piece of paper and jot down any ideas that you have. What's the best thing that you could actually gift yourself to show yourself that you care this year? And then think about how you might be able to do that. Perhaps it's the gift of time to read the new novel that you've asked for Christmas. Perhaps it's the gift of time to walk in the countryside. Perhaps it's the gift of having a meal out in a restaurant rather than making it at home. Whatever it is, think about what would give you some pleasure and give yourself that gift. And then let's talk about children, because this is one of the concerns that comes up in a lot of my sessions. So I really believe that your children will follow your lead. So if your children aren't with you for parts perhaps of the holidays, have a think about how you can focus your attention onto the time that you do have together, rather than focusing resentment on the time that you don't. Because your children will take their cue from you. If you are down and negative, they will be as well. If you're angry and resentful, then they are likely to feel conflicted and stressed and perhaps worried about you when they're not with you. When you're upbeat and you make plans to do things that you will all enjoy in the time that you're together, they'll do the same. And you can involve your children in this process. You could perhaps sit them down again with a big piece of paper and ask them, what kind of things would you like to do this Christmas? What traditions might you like to start? What do some of your friends do that you'd like to try? And focus then on arranging some of those things and be proactive. And even if you don't have the children on Christmas Day, remind yourself that Christmas Day is just a day and you can have yours whenever you want. So when my children are at their dad's, we have a full-on Christmas on another day. It might be before Christmas, it might be after Christmas, sometimes it's even in January. And whenever my children talk about Christmas now, one of their first questions is, A, who are we with this year for Christmas? Because they can't remember from one year to the next. And secondly, when's Christmas Day for us this year, Mum? So they just want to know when it's going to be. And put yourself in their shoes. This is really important. When I say put yourself in your children's shoes, I mean really put yourself in them. So imagine that you are standing in their shoes, and sometimes it can help to close your eyes and do this and sit and really, really imagine that you are them. You see things through their eyes, you hear things through their ears, and you are experiencing things from their perspective. It can be challenging, but it's really worth doing. And then ask yourself, how do they feel? What do they want? And if they could give you any message about Christmas, what would it be? And just see what comes up. Most children, evidence shows, just want to be able to see both their parents. They want to be able to have fun with both of you, and they want to be free to be able to love you both. So when you put the children's interests right at the top, no child wants to see their parents arguing over where they're going to spend Christmas Day. In the long run, they'll remember that arguing for many years more than they will remember which house they were in. And I can vouch for that. My children can't even remember where they were last year for Christmas. Yeah, don't involve them in those arguments between yourselves. In the long run, it isn't important. It's better that they feel wanted and loved. Obviously, I'm not talking about potential scenarios where there's abuse and so on in this case. I'm talking about situations where perhaps co-parenting is more possible. In those other situations, then take advice and do the right thing. If you have to spend time with your ex perhaps over Christmas, then try and set an intention to be kind. Take a step back from the emotion. Try and put aside your differences over Christmas. In particular, if you are perhaps spending Christmas Day together, perhaps you can agree not to mention the divorce. Perhaps you can agree to kind of park it for that period of time. And also, if you're struggling with this, make a conscious decision to try and respond rather than react. So if your ex-partner says something that triggers a feeling in you, take a really deep breath before you respond. Stop and breathe and think before you act. Also, you can imagine yourself putting on your kind of Teflon suit and zipping yourself up into it before you get together. That Teflon suit is magic. It has slopey shoulders, it's slidey, so any kind of barbed comments or angry words can just slide off it, and perhaps you can put them aside for that day. So protect yourself by wearing your Teflon suit. And then lastly, if you're really worried about spending time with your ex, or even you're worried about how the handover perhaps of your children is going to go, remember that you can always rehearse how you want to behave. You can be the Steven Spielberg of your own mind. So your brain doesn't know the difference between something that you imagine and something that you remember. So if you can prepare for your ex by rehearsing through how you want to behave, thinking of the things that you want to say, imagining how you want to hold yourself, imagining how you want to be during that time, and then run it like a movie in your mind over and over again. When you come to actually do it in real life, your brain will be comfortable and it will think, oh, I've already done this. I know how to be civil. I know how to be polite. And I know how to behave in the way that I really want to. And you can repeat this as many times as you like. And notice that once you've done this, you will feel more confident about what you want to say and how you want to be and how you want to feel. And your brain will remember that. So in summary, I'm going to stop the share if I can. There we go. In summary, what I think my main point really is that it can take you lots and lots of energy to really worry about Christmas and to become stressed about Christmas and to build it into a massive thing and catastrophize it. But if you could put that energy into planning for how to make it better, asking yourself some questions about how you can reframe it and how you can make it work for you, then that's going to be really good for you, and it's a choice that you can make. So the key is to shift your focus. Stop worrying about it, concentrate on what you can do to make the Christmas holidays as good as they possibly can be, both in the times when you have your children and in the times when you don't. And you never know, you might in the process create a tradition that you really enjoy and that you want to take forward. So that's my little bit about Christmas for today. I don't know how, I know that Lauren, you've got lots of experience with this as well. Have you got anything that you want to add to those tips?
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Clara, if I could start with some practicalities, which I think will be helpful from your points of planning ahead. It's the really basic practicalities to think about of if you're taking legal advice or you're anticipating there may be issues, is to remember a lot of offices shut. To take into account the fact that you might not be able to get hold of your solicitor, if there's things that you're anticipating wanting to talk about, to plan ahead on that basis. And we're focusing on there being a degree of being amicable between parents, but there's also the situation where there might already be court orders in place in respect of the children. and there may be issues of people attempting, or the anticipation of what happens if those orders are breached.
Yes.
And to kind of have in place a contingency plan as to what you may be able to action or not action, because not only might you not be able to talk to your solicitors, there may be other professionals that you're in touch with that also you can't speak to because their offices are shut. And also the courts are generally working on a skeleton staff as well. So that's just something to think about there. And also in respect of planning ahead in respect of families, things that I see a lot come up with, and we've done sessions on this before, and I know we're going to revisit it, is it's your own boundaries with how you want to plan with other people. And you mentioned kind of spending time with in-laws and things like that. And you may have busybody family members. You may have that one person that you know is always going to make comments that upset people, or even things that people act in an innocent way. So grandparents may take presents to one person's house, but actually, should they have been kept at their own house? Should they have been taken somewhere else? So tensions, I find, can be raised there as well. And I think we've talked about this before, but I'll mention it again as well, Claire, is the Our Family Wizard app. And there's various different parenting apps and mutual calendars and things like that that can be really helpful to be used if there isn't court order, if there is court orders, and if there isn't court orders in place. And also there's various, depends on the age of the children, there is various apps that the children can access as well. So if they've got a football match with their friends, or they've got a party they're going to on Tuesday afternoon, it can all be put into the calendar so that there isn't any confusion and tension between, well, where are people and what are they doing? So that's just something for people to think about there as well. And then talking about finances, there may already be financial arrangements in place, there may not be. We've got the cost of living crisis, and Christmas can be a really stressful time if money is tight, or if there's an unknown entity in respect of money and who's paying what. And again, that's just something to think about and talk about and deal with if you can in advance. And sometimes, as you said, there can be tensions between somebody that has more money than the other person spending lots more money, and of course the focus is spending time with your family and children, and that could give all those feelings of resentment and anger that were in your wheel. So I'm always conscious of issues like that coming up, and I would say to talk about the finances in advance to take away the stress of anything that might come up there. And also, even to the extent that with the petrol costs and things like that, if people are conscious of, well, who's doing the driving and timings and who's taking people where and when, all of these things that may be a relatively small thing can blow up into a big argument. So just to think about that as well. So those are the kind of practical things. And other than that, it interests me, as I always say, Claire, the kind of wheel of the emotions, and it can be difficult to recognize emotions in yourself and in others as well. And the whole boundaries and replying to emails and things that we've talked about before. But the one thing that I sort of I see come up a lot at Christmas is that feeling of anger. That can be caused by another person's behavior. And for those people that have watched our other last few months, when we talk about not responding immediately to things,
yes,
and a big kind of area to be aware of course, is that there's more likely to be alcohol fueled conversations over the Christmas period, and to just have your own boundary of not responding to things, or if something is said that's upset you, I think is important to think about.
I think there's a strategy that I talk about with clients that we've talked about before that's really helpful here, which is that discretionary engagement. You know, if your ex-partner has sent you an angry message that, you know, at 1 o'clock in the morning on Christmas Eve, when they've clearly had a few drinks and they've been out or whatever, you don't have to respond to anything that comes in like that. You can't control what comes into your inbox or into your text or what comes out of the other person's mouth. You can absolutely control how you respond, so what you fire back. whether you email them back, whether you text them back, or whether you say anything. So with emails and texts, I will say to people, you know, you have a choice now. You have a choice what you say, how you say it, and indeed whether you say anything at all. And some of those texts are probably better ignored, or some of those emails. In terms of when you're face to face and something comes out that you instinctively want to react to in a very emotional way, then the thing to do, I think, is to take that really deep breath and imagine yourself perhaps stepping out of that conflict and having some exit lines prepared. So you might want to practice, for example, saying, today's not really the day to discuss this. Let's park that until next week. And keep saying that on repeat if necessary. You know, you can be like a stuck record, because it's very difficult for somebody to have conflict with someone else when that person is refusing to enter into it. So you can put those boundaries in place. You know, today's not really the day to talk about this. Let's leave it till next week. I'll come back to you on Tuesday, or whatever it might be.
And I think the other important thing as well is that we do deal with lots of cases that can have more serious financial issues in it, and also more serious welfare issues in respect of children. And that's the bit where people need to realise that even if, like, your solicitor's office is shut, you can always get help from the police or from social services. I know, and that's not the focus of the conversation today, but I think it's just important for people to know that there is other avenues that they can go down there.
That comes up, I guess, in response to the kinds of questions around, you know, if we have an agreement and my ex-partner doesn't stick to it, so they don't bring the children home, or, you know, whatever it might be, what can I actually do? And you know, there are practical things that you can do. So if you've got an agreement and you've agreed it, and it's outside of a court ordered arrangement, what can you do then? And is it different if you've got a court order that sets out the days?
Yeah, and I mean, sadly, if there is a court order in place, unless there is something that is desperately an emergency, even if solicitors' offices are open, you still have to deal with making applications and waiting patiently for that to happen. The court system will deal at the moment with emergency applications, but in respect of other matters, the court is so pushed for time. And I know that we've talked about this in other sessions, and it's not for the full details of today and processes, but things are taking an awfully long time to go through the court system. So again, I think that the message needs to be the planning ahead, I would say, in all avenues of finances, children, and anything else that may come in, especially if you are within a mediation process as well. Is there a session that you need to have before Christmas? Because of course we've still got plenty of time now for people to put in place those plans. And any of my clients and potential clients, please do get in touch if you do have any thoughts or concerns or questions that we can answer now.
Yeah, and one of the other things I always think is, you know, if something goes wrong this Christmas, then in January, perhaps January is the time to get back in contact with you, for example, for advice on how can we prevent something like this happening again next year or at a different time. So perhaps sometimes it's holding your nerve a little bit and waiting to get that advice in the new year.
Yeah, and sometimes it might be, so just for instance, say if somebody's meant to bring a child back at 6 p.m. and they say, sorry, I'm keeping them till the next morning, actually is the best thing to do is to do nothing, despite you may be feeling anger. Turning up at the door and having an argument might not be the best thing to do. If the children are safe and it's somebody perhaps just acting in a bitter way against the other person, just to think carefully. But my message would be, our usual message is to try to reflect on it before acting.
Yeah.
But bearing in mind that if there is any kind of criminal behaviour, which sounds very dramatic, but of course sometimes it happens, that you seek the right assistance.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you very much. So moving away from some of that stuff, I also sometimes get questions around what if the children are worried about me when they go to their other parents' house? And I always say to them, to those people, you know, it's really important that you explain to your children that you've got some things arranged, you're going to do some fun stuff. And I've had clients make it sound like they're going to have so much fun when their children are away at their other parent, that the children then start to say, well, actually, I want to stay here and do that with you instead. So there's kind of a fine line. And I think it's really important for the children to understand that when they're at their other parent's house, your life doesn't stop. That you carry on doing things, that it's really healthy for you to do those things, because that's teaching them about self-care, and that's teaching them about looking after themselves as well. So I think that's really important, to be quite openly communicative with the children.
And sometimes it can be really difficult, depending on the ages of children, to not burden children with knowing information or having to make decisions about things when they're too young to. But then on the other hand, involving children in some decisions is the right thing to do. So I suppose you've got the issue of you being a parent and making the best decisions you can for your children, but also if you feel as though, well, you don't know how to deal with something, to talk that through. If there is an issue that's involving school, for instance, can the school, any pastoral care at the school help with that? Is there a mutual family member that a child may want to talk to, so they don't have to talk to the parents? Or, not that I can give any advice, I'm not qualified in any way in any kind of child psychological qualifications, but of course I hear a lot about what the courts say about children in CAFCAS, so I'm always happy to give a point in the right direction to professionals that would be able to help with that. I think sometimes people can give too much information to children, so perhaps that's just something to think about in advance if there is going to be awkward questions.
Absolutely. I think that the really good parts to get the children involved in are the things I was talking about earlier. You know, let's brainstorm some ideas of things that we'd like to do, and let's make a list of all the experiences we'd like to have, and talk about it in that way, so that you're giving them choices, but not too many choices for their age, and not inappropriate choices for them to make.
No, and the thing with money often does come up where a client may say, well, the other person has talked about money to the children, and then it's to not engage yourself, being forced into conversations that you don't want to have. And sometimes it can be really tricky to know what to say. None of this is easy, and all you can do is do the best you can at that time, to help your children and to help yourself, and to not beat yourself up about saying something and you later think, oh, perhaps I shouldn't have said it quite like that. We're only human, and we can only deal with things as we can in that moment.
Absolutely. And so I think, you know, being the best parent you can be on your time is the only thing you can really do. You can't make the other person different, but you can be as the best parent you can be on your time, and to like you were saying just now, to kind of temper that with kindness. You know, we all make mistakes. I've said things to my children that I think afterwards, probably shouldn't have said that. But then that's an opportunity. I see that as an opportunity then to reflect and think, well, next time, what would I do differently? So, you know, don't beat yourself up if you make a mistake, or you say something that you later think, oh, I wasn't quite sure about that. Really use it as an opportunity to think, what could I do better next time? What could I say differently next time? And try different things out, because there's no such thing as failure. It's all feedback. That's the way I like to look at it.
And for those clients that are listening to this, or potential clients, that I've got quite a lot of cases at the moment that have got financial proceedings in place, and some that have got court timetables in place, some that have got agreed timetables in place. And actually, I would probably say in more cases than other, there has been agreements that everybody does just park everything over Christmas, and actually have that week to just not think about it, to not have a deadline early on, like the 4th of January or something, so everybody's under pressure, especially if there's businesses involved, where then you're negotiating your own business at a difficult time of year as well. So I always think that is something that could be a discussion between solicitors.
Yeah, brilliant. And that you know, we were talking earlier about stepping into the children's shoes. Sometimes it's helpful to also step into your ex-partner's shoes, especially if there's an issue that there's high conflict around. Sometimes it can be really helpful to step into their shoes in your own mind and see if you can understand their perspective. And some interesting things sometimes come out of doing that, and then you might want to change your approach accordingly. I think. So I think unless there's any other questions, hopefully we've given our viewers some food for thought around how they could perhaps change Christmas for themselves. That was my real, the real goal for me today, was to help give some strategies for how you can feel differently about something which can be very challenging and can be very emotional time.
Yeah, and my main message, I think, to take from all of this is the planning ahead. And please do let me know if you have any questions or I can help with anything. And other than that, Claire, I think it will be for us, strangely, to wish people oh no, we have got
we've got one more.
Yes,
so
I was forgetting. Yes, I was going to wish everybody happy Christmas. Well, I can do that next time.
Next time. So we meet again on Thursday, the 8th of December, and we're going to talk about whether divorce can ever be a good thing. Hopefully we're going to bust some myths.
Yeah, excellent.
So
well, thank you, everybody. Yes, thank you everybody for joining us, and do let us know any feedback, any questions, any topics you wish for us to cover. We tend to do sessions like this where we're focusing on hints and tips, and we cover a few different areas, but if anybody wishes to focus or thinks they would like a session on something very specific, then please do let us know.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much, and see you all next month.
Bye now.
Bye.